I live 100 years, I'll just never, ever be able to tell the story the way it really happened. These young kids who, you just run up to them, and when we were all boxed in, they were all around, and they were all over our perimeter, and we're throwing grenades, and I got pretty close, and just run up to one of these kids and say, Marine, we're going to get out of here, aren't we? And the kid look up to you and say, you're damn right we are, Skipper.
I was 23 years old when I went into Parris Island. I was somewhat older than the balance of the recruits in that barracks. I decided to go into the Marine Corps after I had left college, and at that point I was 23 years old. I think the word jolt describes the initial impression that you have, especially Parris Island, especially Marine Corps. The screaming, the yelling, the constant involvement in activities. But after a while, and after a couple of weeks, I started to grasp it. I started to realize it was a schedule, and a tight schedule. And I felt I became pretty acclimated pretty quickly. We were on a C-130, and the back of the C-130 opens up like a jaw. And I felt this inrush of heat. And I've never forgotten that. That's the heat of off the tarmac there where the plane landed. We were taken by bus to a transient area, then taken by truck to southwest southwest of Da Nang. And my feeling was, I guess for maybe a month or so, some anxiety, some sense of, am I going to do the right thing? What do I have to learn? I'm a new guy in a block. That kind of passed. You get somewhat acclimated after a period of time. I was fortunate that, if you can say fortunate, I started my service time in Vietnam, southwest of Da Nang. It was an area that was occupied mostly with the Viet Cong, the VC, and we had encounters with them. We had a lot of booby trap encounters. We had small firefights and ambushes with them. And it was a learning curve for me. We gradually, the unit moved up to an area known as Camp Evans, and our activities increased greatly. And we went out towards the Laotian border, and which was called the Hai Lang National Forest. And we did patrols there and sweeps there, and we started to be engaged with the NVA, but not really in a great deal of encounters. Then we went up to Con Thien. My unit was the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, part of the 3rd Marine Division, also known as the Magnificent Bastards. We went up to Con Thien, and that's when we were heavily engaged with the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army. So it was, as I say, a learning curve. I seemed to start off a little slow, and then it gradually got faster and faster and more involved. And it was really involved when we went up to Con Thien. Well, initially, it was a sense of duty, a sense of my obligation to go in and join the Marine Corps, fight for what the country was stood for. And I think that's the broad picture. But as you get into combat, I think what happened, at least happened to me, is that narrowed down very much and became very specific. I was fighting for my own survival and the survival of the grunt, the Marine next to me. Combat is chaotic. Day to day, up and around Con Thien was chaotic. We were situated outside the wire of Con Thien. Con Thien being a fire base just a couple of miles below the DMZ, the militarized zone. At that time, they situated 4 battalions, one in each quadrant around Con Thien. Being outside the wire, all we had were foxholes for protection. It was rainy, it was muddy, it was horrible. And every day we had incoming artillery, rockets, and mortar without fail. Con Thien is just, it was originally a French outpost. It's just a hill. In fact, they call it the Hill of Angels. And it's a fire base. And it really wasn't that large. I say like 3/4 city blocks wide, the North Vietnamese had tried to overrun it starting in 1966. And the Marine Corps took it over from the, I think there was a small contingent of ARVN up there originally. The Marine Corps came in, enlarged the perimeter, fortified it even better, put barbed wire around, concertina wire around it, minefields around it. And the purpose of our being there was to interdict the North Vietnamese army from moving down south into what was Quang Tri province. And we had many, many occasions where we came face to face with them. We knew they were there. Where they were exactly, you didn't know until you ran into them. Running patrols outside of where we were extremely dangerous. There had been a history of encounters with large elements of the North Vietnamese Army, battalion and regiment-sized elements. And we followed the same trails as other units had followed and got involved in the similar type engagements. If they were able to come through the DMZ and come past us, they had a free flow approach to Quang Tri province, Quang Tri, and anything south of it. The Marine Corps had set up bases there starting around '66, and it was known as Leatherneck Square, the way the bases were situated, and Con Thien being the most predominant at the time. My most difficult moments up in that area, and in fact in my whole experience in Vietnam, was on September 21st. The 2nd Battalion was designated to run a sweep east of Con Thien's perimeter. And the unit started out around 6:30 in the morning, and we swept. And we had Fox and Echo would come in from an eastern direction. They let Golf Company move over to a southerly position, and we was the sweep an area near the village of Phu Ac. Sweep means to essentially move online in this case. Move and sweep the enemy ahead of you into a blocking force that would precipitate the involving encountering the enemy and eliminating the enemy. So if you visualized Echo and Fox moving along in one direction, and Golf, and the idea was that Echo and Fox would swing south, sweep them south into Golf Company. But before we even were able to move in that direction on a swinging of the sweep, so to speak, Fox Company got involved with sniper fire. They rushed the sniper fire only to be caught in open fields with the enemy that was well entrenched, well fortified, and well numbered. And they had machine guns set up. It was an L-shape type of ambush where they had fields of fire dissecting the oncoming Marine attack. F Company was locked down, couldn't get out of there. Echo came, my company came to their aid. We got locked down. We couldn't get out of there. Golf was eventually brought up to try to make headway so we could disengage. What the North Vietnamese would do would be to pull us in as close as they could, as if we're going to pull someone in by the belt and get them right up close, start fire on them. This way, we couldn't bring in supporting fire, which was artillery and aircraft and maybe naval gunfire. Well, this battle went on all day, back and forth, back and forth. We finally were able to disengage somewhat. The North Vietnamese brought in their supporting artillery from the DMZ. We brought in our supporting artillery. We never were able to overrun them. They were never able to come out of their bunkers and get to us. They finally, at the end of the day, disengaged and disappeared. We pulled back. We went in, got our dead and wounded, and brought them back. Two things about this battle that bothers me very much, and it has been bothering me for a long time. The first thing was we left 15 Marines there. We were not able to go back to get them for 2 weeks. And the other thing was when we had to take the fallen Marines that we could pull back and put them on choppers. Those are memories that never leave me. We went up there, they say, with maybe 600 in the beginning of September, the battalion, and we came back at the end of October with less than half that number that were fit to fight. I was injured 4 days before I got out of there. I was never wounded, and I thank God for that. When we went back 2 weeks later to recover the bodies, we found them mutilated. In fact, they had tacked onto a tree a Marine Corps tattoo that one of the Marines had on his chest. And that's something we never did to the enemy. We were at Con Thien that time just short of 60 days. We had been up there earlier in July in support of another battalion. But those were 60 long days. The word war is a small word that encompasses a lot of things, but combat is more specific, and combat is hard to describe. It's dirty, it's vile, it instills fear. And it's a horrible thing. I think anybody that goes through combat is changed forever. I think it always stays with you in one way or the other. And it was Agent Orange. We saw it all over. We saw it down south where I was initially. We saw it up near the forest near Camp Evans. It was all over. You could see it on the leaves of the vegetation like a powder of some sort. It's left its mark on me. I've had cancer related to Agent Orange. And it's actually, I don't think there's one person in Vietnam that it hasn't affected, because it was all over and it doesn't dissolve. Once it's in the fat of your body, it's there. It's a dioxin. I did R&R in December after being in country about 11 months, because I had a couple of things happen and I couldn't get it probably sooner than that. I went to Taipei. The first 3 hours in Taipei, I spent in a shower getting red clay off my body. I did a cultural tour of Taipei. I went to museums, believe it or not, and I went to waterfalls up in the mountains, and I did a little drinking. First and most important thing was getting that plane off the tarmac in Da Nang. Tet was in full scale at the time, and that was the primary thing. But the other thing was to come home. I was being discharged shortly thereafter. I had a son born while I was over there. Seeing my son, my wife, my family, and getting on with my life, and essentially leaving that behind me. I think John McInerney was influential in helping me open up. He got me to go to a reunion after, I said, 25 years ago. And I met fellow Marines who shared similar experiences, same places, 6 months either side of each other. And we could talk about it. We could understand each other. And that's when I started to talk about it. I would hope from this war we did learn something, meaning the Vietnam War. One of the things I think we should have learned is, if you're going to do it completely, do it with a commitment to finish. But first of all, before you commit, before you do it, make sure it's the right thing to do. Maybe this wasn't the right thing to do. I still have questions in my mind about this, and I'm kind of a right-of-center individual, and I can still question it. I think the people should remember that those they send to fight the battles for this country do so in an honest, meaningful way. They join the service as a sense of commitment to their country. They're not political. They go where they're told, they do what they're told, and they fight hard, and they give. And the giving doesn't stop after they get home. So if you're going to do it the right way and honor these veterans. Well, I think the experience overall, on a positive side, made me determined when I got home to do something positive for myself and keep going and seeing what can happen. Life is short. It can be very short. And it really drove me, I think, in later years to achieve certain things in my life.